The first year after teaching, my wife said I didn't do anything for a year, just relaxed. Once I got a bit of energy back, my main focus is writing songs. I've got lots of ideas. I'm not running out of ideas. There's another song. There's plenty on my list of ideas I've got for writing songs. It has been a matter of honing the craft, working at it. I think I've always been quite good with words. So for me, melody is king, but words are really important as well.
Welcome back to Second Verse, the show that celebrates indie artists who've taken a bold turn or return toward music later in life. I'm your host, Becky Boyland, and today I'm taking you across the Atlantic to the poetic hills and harmonies of Wales. My guest, Phil Lovell, is a retired teacher turned songwriter who crafts thoughtful, often bilingual songs in English and Welsh. He's been compared to Neil Tennant, Nick Drake, and even Noel Coward, and draws his musical DNA from greats like the Beatles, Cole Porter, and Rodgers and Hammerstein. Phil didn't pursue music as a career early on. Instead, he nurtured it in quiet corners while working in education for over 30 years. But since retiring, he's poured his energy into songwriting, performing in open mics, and even pitching a music-centered TV series. We'll talk about his creative process, the gift of time and reflection, the powerful role of music and the arts, culture, and society, and some fascinating insights into the Welsh language, and what it's like to pursue the passion of songwriting at a life stage when many are slowing down. If you've ever felt like you missed your chance or weren't sure if your music would matter, Phil's story is going to move you. Let's jump in to Phil's second verse. Welcome, Phil. Thanks for being on Second Verse.
No problem at all.
Just like so many other artists, I imagine that you were bitten by the bug very early on.
Yeah, I suppose so. My father used to play the piano in the parlour, the special room. You only went in there when you had your Sunday best on. So my father used to play the piano. So that, from a very early age, percolated into my brain. I started with music lessons, played the piano, stopped playing the piano in the lessons after a while. And then my father bought an electric Hammond organ when I was about 12. I stopped playing for quite a while. And then quietly, secretly, I started picking it up and learning the chords. I became more a chord person rather than reading music straight off. So that was a big difference. And I started writing music when, I suppose, 15, 16, 17, writing rubbish. But that sort of works its way through eventually, I think.
So it's possible to secretly learn organ? I would think that it would stand out a bit.
Secretly, in the fact that I was learning it when my father wasn't around.
Got it.
So I practiced when he wasn't around, and then I only sort of revealed that I'd been learning when I got to some sort of level. Otherwise, I think my father was quite critical. He'd say, that's wrong there, you should do this instead. So I sort of followed my own trail for quite a while.
So the concept of ever becoming a professional musician would have gone out the window.
I don't think I had realistic aims of being a professional musician. I would have liked to have been a composer, songwriter from a young age. I used to play a lot with words, poetry. When I started teaching in my early 20s, I used to go to open mics and recite poetry and so on, or the poems I'd written, all sort of ones, trying to be funny with them, write some songs as well. But it was really, there weren't that many. There are 3 or 4 I look back on and I still quite like. I've rejigged them a bit from that era. When I went into teaching, I used them a bit. I wrote a few songs for kids in the secondary school. So I used to do assemblies, concerts with some of the songs I wrote, but also in primary school, which is for my students. With them were under 11, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, who, when a teacher writes something for them, they're really keen on performing. So I would write Christmas songs, a few other things. There were other occasions when I did a few minor concerts myself. Teaching is such a busy job. You expend your energy on preparing resources, being creative with your lessons and so on. There wasn't that much time left to be musical.
I imagine that a lot of those students that got to sing those songs you wrote still remember that. What an amazing thing.
There was a reunion a few years back of kids I taught when I was probably in my early 20s. And these students were now coming towards 50. So there wasn't much of an age gap between me and them, maybe 5 or 6 years. One of the lads said to me, "Do you know what I am now?" I said, "No, I got no idea." "Do you know what my job is?" "I'm an Elvis impersonator." Then he went on to sing one of my songs I wrote for him. It was the first time he'd ever been on the stage in front of the whole school. He remembered the words of this song I wrote about the school dinner blues. Must have been 30 odd years ago. So some sort of impact, yeah. And there's a tradition in Wales as well of Eisteddfodau, which is, there's a competitive element. So, for example, my daughter, when she was 3, 4, she'd go to the local competition, which is my Eisteddfod, with lots of different types of competitions. And then you'd have children from other schools, and each individual child, they'd go on the stage one by one. So you may have 20 children from just in the local Eisteddfod, and they'd sing the chosen song. Then 3 would be chosen, and they would then compete in the county, and then those would end up competing in Wales on the televised stage. So there's a tradition in Wales of performing and singing from a very young age.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, did you teach specific subjects or were you a grade teacher?
In secondary school, I taught a range of subjects: English, Welsh, drama, a variety of subjects. But in primary, you teach everything.
Right.
Mind you, I'm not sure how good I was as a science teacher, but by the by.
So now, as you are coming back to music, talk about that transition. I understand that came because you've retired from teaching. And what does that look like for you?
The first year after teaching, my wife said I didn't do anything for a year, just relaxed. Once I got a bit of energy back, that's been one of my main focuses, particularly writing songs. I'm quite prodigious at the moment. I've got lots of ideas. I'm not running out of ideas. There's another song, There's plenty on my list of ideas I've got for writing songs. In the last few years, what I've done is to hone the craft. I've gone to several, which is where I met you, to several songwriting courses. The first one was fantastic because it was with Willie Russell, who wrote Blood Brothers and Educating Rita and so on, worked with the Beatles. And that was just amazing to something like 14 of us with him for the week.
Yeah.
And getting support from him and even co-writing a song with him. It was just amazing. And that sort of gave me the belief that I could do it. It has been a matter of honing the craft, working at it. I think I've always been quite good with words. So for me, melody is king, but words are really important as well. Somebody was saying to me recently that he doesn't like songs where the words, you know what's coming next. They're cliched. And I'm the same. Having spent quite a bit of time writing poetry, I do like to manipulate the words and think about them and make sure that they're as clever and as crafted as they can be from me. So I've been on several songwriting courses. Another one I went on was with Dean Friedman, who's a singer-songwriter from America in the 70s. So those were amongst the first few. And by now, I'm trying to go on probably 2 at least a year, just out of enjoyment and learning something every year. Every course I go on, I find I'm learning something, working with different people, different musicians. As a result of that, my songwriting has improved. As regards performance, being a teacher, being in front of kids, you just perform. A teacher generally is a performer, an actor. So I've not had any problem in confidence in standing up in front of people and singing or playing music, even if I'm rubbish. I've just got that front. In the last year, I've done a lot more, quite a few open mics, jamming sessions with people, and realised I can do this, So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Been to a few recording studios, only one that was any good, and probably doing another one, quite a major recording studio in Wales I'm hoping to go to this year. So, yeah, so busy. Plenty of ideas.
And of course, any songwriter is saying that's exactly the place you want to be when you don't run out of ideas. But I really love that point that you made about teachers being actors, having to have not only that ease and that comfort, but also understanding that presentation is so important in education. And then to see that translated into your music performance, I think is really special. That's a very cool insight that maybe a lot of people haven't thought
Mm.
about.
Yeah. I mean, it is strange. I think it was Bing Crosby said he never really got nervous when he was performing. And there are a few people like that. I don't. Perhaps it's because of the teaching part of it and having to stand in front of kids from 18-year-olds from when I was 23, 24, just standing in front of them and telling them what to do or leading assemblies. It's just part of the job. And I just see it as well. If you make mistakes, so what? It's not a big deal. You're just singing in front of people. It's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. And I think that can really translate for those who they have this dream, they know they have this passion, but the first thing they think is, oh, I would be so terrified to be in front of people. But when you do it, when you get into it, if you remember one to stay in the moment, but also that it doesn't really matter. If you're just putting your best out there, it's going to be okay. And people generally do want to
Yeah.
be helpful and kind and loving, especially when they know that you're just trying something new and getting out there for the very first time. People don't generally just want to be mean.
And I think the worst thing you can do as a performer is to be worried about being perfect because you'll never be perfect. Being able to see yourself as other people see you is something that's really difficult sometimes. Quite often people don't appreciate themselves. They don't actually understand what they're like from other people's standpoints. And I think it's just important to be yourself. If you make mistakes, nobody cares. You'll probably get more support if you make a mistake rather than going, oh, sorry. I've seen situations where people ending up, they make a mistake and you hear them swearing at themselves in front of an audience instead of just, oh, sorry, and move on. You can make the audience uncomfortable, I think, and it is important not to make the audience uncomfortable. Just go with the flow, do your best, and that's all you can do, really.
Yeah, that's actually a key. They need to feel that they're in good hands because there's nothing worse
Mm.
than watching a performer who you know is not comfortable and feeling as an audience member that you now are taking responsibility for how they feel. Those are the situations that are just so uncomfortable and awkward and painful for everyone. Whereas if you're just real and casual and dealing with anything that might go awry, but you're remembering that the audience is in your hands, that makes such a difference. That really
Yeah.
does.
I've been to some gigs recently, and one had the main singer, and he was so poor at relating to the audience. Yet his support was so relaxed, so funny, just expressed himself as a natural person, whereas the other person was putting on an act. And the audience can see this is not the real person. So I think it is important to try to be yourself, be natural, rather than perform as a different person from yourself. And yeah, I did mention acting. Of course, you have to put on a type of persona, but it needs to be yourself.
Kind of yourself plus.
Yeah,
You might be having a
yeah,
bad day before you go and perform, but at the same time, if you really get into it, you can fix your own bad day along with everybody else's. And yeah, I just thought that was such a cool insight. So I wanted to spend a little time there. But so you now are also doing some open mics and performance. And so talk about what you've got going on now.
Well, last weekend I did two open mics. One was a Welsh language one, which was supposed to go from 12 o'clock midday and finish at about 2:30. There was a rugby game on the pub we're supposed to watch. And then after that, it was an hour or two of an open mic, but it went on for hours and hours and hours. But it was a jam situation in the end. And that was really nice. There was a saxophonist and a guitarist seemed to gel with what I was doing. So they were just busking along beside me with some of my songs, which is really, really nice.
Yeah.
And then the following night, these two host an open mic about 20 odd miles away from here. So I went to that. It was an opportunity to work with other musicians, play around with them. So quite a few open mics. There's plenty around here, but particularly there's one I hope to do fairly soon in the Cavern Club in Liverpool, which is a pretty famous one with the Beetle Street. But apparently it's not the same cavern, but it's the same street. That's a very, very popular one, specifically for songwriters. And Liverpool's not that far from here. You can get there in an hour.
That's got to be so exciting, especially when I'm sure that there are gigs that are just playing popular music, but to hear fresh stuff from other songwriters and to have that opportunity to jam with folks, I can imagine that you would never want that to end.
Yeah. For me, my favorite thing is where I've got somebody who's a good singer who sings my songs.
Mm.
So there have been opportunities for that, or to sing together with somebody like that. That's a privilege. I really, really appreciate that. One of my thoughts as regards recording later in the year is to record my songs, but also perhaps get somebody else to sing their versions of them with the backing music. So there'd be two versions, mine with my limited voice range, but also I know some very talented female singers, which I quite like them to sing one or two of my songs.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We'll be back with more after this break. The second verse is sponsored by Attitude Creativity. Many indie music artists don't have a website that grows their audience and reflects who they are, so they get lost in the noise of streaming. Marketing and brand messaging with Attitude Creativity helps boost your brand and build a site that hits all the right notes. You want to be an artist who stands out from the crowd, and to do that, you need your music to be heard. If your website doesn't reflect who you are or make an impact, you feel like a singer who's been handed a pair of drumsticks instead of a mic. You deserve a website and brand messaging you can be proud of, and that doesn't take time away from your music. As an artist like you, I understand how overwhelming websites and marketing can be, and that's why, putting on my other creative hat, I put my decades of marketing and development experience to work for you. You'll no longer have to apologize for your website. You'll look and feel like a professional with a custom story branded website you can be proud of. And right now, you can get a head start with my free downloadable EPK blueprint and start building your electronic press kit to promote your music. Head to attitudecreativity.com/blueprint to get your copy. That's Attitude, ATTITUDE, creativity.com/blueprint. Second verse is brought to you by Singing Straw. Oh, you caught me in the middle of a vocal warm-up. This is one of my favorite ways to wake up my vocal cords before a singing session, or even a nice long conversation for the Second Verse podcast. It's the Singing Straw, a simple but powerful tool for straw phonation, a vocal technique that promotes healthy vocal cord closure in a gentle but mighty way to increase range and identify areas to work on. For me, it was key to regaining my voice after vocal cord paralysis. But you don't have to wait until a vocal injury to use it. In fact, I recommend that you don't. Make the Singing Straw part of your daily routine, and you'll be amazed what your voice can do. Check it out at secondversepod.com/singing straw. What has been the biggest challenge of bringing music back to a forefront in your life?
The biggest challenge is the admin and pushing myself, really. There's a songwriter in Wales, a performer in Wales called Al Lewis. And I heard him on the radio a year or two ago. And he performed with some well-known artists in Britain, toured with them. And he was talking about how he would send his music out to so many people and he'd get 99 rejections and get one, which would get him somewhere. And that willingness to accept rejection constantly, this sort of attitude has got him to record with some big artists in America just through sending his music out there and being invited to perform or to record in the States. So that sort of attitude, really, where to push yourself to be assertive, being a bit more assertive than I am, and accept all those rejections. I think it's the admin as well. the energy. What I really like doing is writing the songs. If somebody then took them off me and sang the songs, I'd be perfectly happy. I wouldn't mind doing one or two concerts, but I like my life as it is. I like walking my dog every morning and doing the other things. I don't really require what I'm doing to be successful, mega successful or anything like that. But if the songs on their own can lead them somewhere else and get some mileage out of them, I'd be happy with that.
Oh, for sure. When we want to bring it to the forefront as a writer, more so than as a performer, there's still kind of elevating that hobby to its own position. And it's hard to not just still treat it the way that it was as a hobby, and pushing myself to get in the studio sometimes and be a little bit more consistent is just reminding myself that, hey, this has a different place in my life now. It's not just when I have time. It's I'm making
Yeah.
time to do things, but it doesn't mean that I always love filling out paperwork and doing all the things that are required.
Yeah. The difficulty with quite a lot of creative people is they like the creative parts of it and the rest of it, not keen on. But for those who want to make money out of it and make a living, you have to do all those aspects as well. You have to do the self-promotion, all the TikToks and Instagrams. I remember talking to Izza Abbott on the course in Noidat, and they were teaching me a bit about it and telling me what I should do and how I should go about it. Even saying that a boomer, not a term I normally use, but they were using about me, would almost have more chance of success on Instagram or TikTok because you'd be a bit more different.
Mhm.
You know, you wouldn't be the run of the mill because there are so many young people using it now. Being a point of difference, I think I would quite like the creative aspect of that, making interesting videos or daft videos about my songs, that imaginative part of it. But whether I would really want to put the energy into doing it every day and that slog when it's no longer fun. And I suppose what I'm in it for is the enjoyment factor and the creative aspect of it. I think as you're getting older, it is important you have something to fill your hours with. You're always learning, you're always improving yourself. So that's why I said I feel I've got lots of ideas at the moment for songs. And to me, that's important that writing a song is driving me rather than necessarily becoming a huge success or having a dream like that. But there are certain songs I'd like to be pushed a bit further, but how much energy I'm going to put into it is another matter.
Yeah. And that is key, what you said about fun, especially for creatives when it comes to self promotion or anything that they are going to fill their time with. If that's sucking the life out of it. And as you talked about when you were a teacher, the amount of creative energy that had to be expended made it more difficult to come back and do more music in your off hours because you had to recharge. So often it's recommended that people post every day and create wild and crazy and super creative and potentially expensive content. That just gets so overwhelming. That's not necessary anymore because it really stands out when people are real. And that's what people want to connect with. And those are so effective to show the experience and the process of writing and creating and crafting is so much more powerful than having to create some huge gimmick that takes up so much time and energy
Mm.
that going back and writing after that is the worst thing you could think.
Yes, yes. When I was a teacher, it seemed to be whichever school I was in, I was drawn to the art department and the art teachers. I would prefer to go to the art department of a secondary school than to go to a gallery. Quite often, there was
Mm.
much more imagination there. So many of the art teachers I talked to who were very creative people did very little art because
Mhm.
they were teachers. They were putting it all into the kids, but not being artists or creative themselves. When they retire or get summer holidays, then they become the creative people that they naturally are. So time is and energy is such a big factor in being creative. And I admire those who can be extremely creative, can be writers when they've got a busy job and a busy life. Finding the time to do that shows a commitment, which as the years went by in my teaching, I certainly didn't have the time later on anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that is a good reminder for why it's so important that we do support people in the arts, because if they don't have the time, don't have the energy to put toward their art, we're all missing out. We don't get to see what they could create if they had the bandwidth. And we're always pushing so close to the limits, running on such limited bandwidth, and we don't realize it until we start to just feel how that drains on every part of our energy and makes it difficult to then even dream again about the things we were so passionate about.
Mm. I don't know what's happening in the States as regards education, but the arts have been squeezed out of the curriculum. Everything is about English, maths, and science. Few schools now have drama teachers.
Mm.
You might have an English teacher who then does a bit of drama, but you'd struggle to find heads of drama departments any longer. So, and music again struggles to have a real place within schools. It's all about, it's become functional education.
Yeah.
I think sometime in the future, the pendulum will swing to the other side. But at the moment, we tend to be going the wrong way in politics.
Yeah. And it definitely is very similar in the States. It's tacitly teaching children as they grow up that these things are optional and that they don't matter. And they're not able to make the intellectual leap to the fact that we're surrounded by, hopefully, music and art and beauty
Mm.
and all of these things. So they really do have value, but they also have a necessity. The adults who are making these decisions aren't making the intellectual leap either, that it is draining on the children to not have this exposure. It's a long game. Eventually, hopefully, they'll figure it out, but will it be too late? Will there be damage done because of lacking that exposure, lacking that understanding, that appreciation, and the therapeutic benefits of being able to be part of something creative?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Being creative, those people who are creative give quality to people's lives. The poorest people in the world, poorest societies value the art and their cultures. The danger is we become monolithic in our approach to culture. Valuing all the different cultures in the world is so important. Not valuing every sort of culture and every sort of country in the world leads to a mindset where you get this superiority complex of some countries, that their culture is better than another's. You look at the attitudes towards immigrants, people who have suffered, who are in war zones, that inability to understand other people's standpoints. And I think, coming back to the point about the arts, it's all about expression, creativity, and empathy. All these things are wrapped up in being creative. Societies being creative, not just individuals. So music being part of that.
Yeah, and there's really such a beautiful community that always gathers around music, whether it's songwriters coming together and creating something that is greater than the sum of its parts, or just finding like-minded folks that understand the fun and crazy way that the creative brain works. It's so important and so beautiful to find community around the arts and around music. And it makes such a difference if you've been isolated in something that's
Mm.
lacking that.
I think there is a difference as well. For me, there is one. I just see things like playing classical music. It's almost like cover versions. I could never play
Mhm.
classical music as several of the kids I've taught are able to do that. And it's the same thing with cover bands. I don't quite get it. Perhaps that's offensive to some people, but I think there should be a balance. I would like people to be more creative and, okay, if they give different versions of those songs, but when they're almost like a carbon copy attempt of a famous song, just put the CD on. To me, it's the creative process is important. So I suppose I do appreciate jazz versions and where people are being creative around the song, but yeah, a bit prejudiced there, but
It's a
yeah.
really good insight, because I think the reason why people like to listen to cover bands is because they have this emotional attachment to a piece of music set in time. And I know for me, I went to a concert of my favorite artist at the time, and he sang a song that I loved so dearly, ever so slightly different, and I wanted to rush the stage. I was so upset. I'm like, "Can you just sing it the way that is on the recording?" And so I understand that, but at the same time, I also, as a performer, want the freedom to do something completely different of a well-known song. And then when it comes to my own stuff in the studio, I wanna try something new. I wanna throw in a different flavor, and it kinda goes back to taking care of the audience and sometimes give them a little
Mm.
bit of what they want. Here's this thing that's set in stone, and we know we shall never deviate. And at the same time, introducing them to something fresh and new that they never saw coming. And I think that wide range of what artists can offer in those different ways is just something so powerful.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead. You're gonna
Yeah, go on.
you're gonna be contrarian, I could tell.
That's one of my weaknesses, being contrary. I suppose if I go to an open mic, I'm quite bored hearing another Elvis song or whatever. If you're gonna do a song like that, do it differently.
Oh, I totally get it.
It's when that is the staple diet. Right, there are songs I wouldn't mind other people singing, but I don't want a carbon copy. Give it your creative input. So make it different, change the style, change the rhythm, whatever. If possible, do that. I appreciate creativity. I appreciate really quirky, different sort of lyrics. I don't know if you're familiar with somebody like Gilbert O'Sullivan from the 1970s. Nobody ever wrote any songs like he did. Some of the lyrics and the breaking the lines up, internal rhymes, half rhymes, and so on. I do like that sort of style of writing. You can't pin on anybody else, they just belong to that individual.
I was actually typing out some lyrics earlier this week and going through a song I wasn't familiar with. Before I would finish typing the line, I knew what it was gonna be, and it was less than satisfying. And I'd never heard the song
Yeah,
before. I love doing something that feels familiar to pull somebody in, but also comes at them in a totally different way they didn't expect. It's just so memorable, and it's so fresh like a bolt of lightning each time that happens in a song. It's the most satisfying as a writer and as a listener. And I love when there's a new version of a well-known song and the version is so different. You don't know it's that song until they get to
yeah,
the chorus. I think that could actually be an excellent exercise for anybody who wants to build their chops to potentially play live or craft music for sync, is take a well-known song and come at it from a different direction. There's a new series that I just started watching, and out of nowhere, they're pulling these wonderful 80s songs and doing them in such a wildly different way. I'm
yeah,
almost lost from the storyline because the song is so good because it's so different. And
yeah,
that captures me every time. And it's a great approach to take because it is something new and then also elevates what was so great about that song in the first place, that it can handle being in a completely different genre. And it just brings those lyrics back to the fore.
yeah. I think it's a matter of challenging yourself to be creative, to look at it from a different angle, trying to be different, have your own voice. There's a Welsh folk song, which is traditional, that's often sung in sporting occasion. But I've heard it done in so many different versions, and each time it sounds different when you've got a blues version of it. Fairly simple, straightforward song. I think I appreciate that rather than hearing the same version every time.
So you talked about Gilbert O'Sullivan. Talk about some of your other influences over the years.
As a child of the 60s, you're going to be touched and influenced by the Beatles. I always like their lyrics being off the wall. Penny Lane, what was that about? They didn't write typical songs. They played around with the formats. They brought Indian style music in. All sorts of genres were in their music. The way that Paul McCartney and John Lennon worked together, just being very inventive. And 4 working class lads from Liverpool doing that. So that was definitely, there were so many songs with hooks in them, simple songs as well, but with clever lyrics. Even if you look at something like She Loves You, you can hardly get simpler lyrics than that, but effectively done. So the Beatles there, but I hear a lot of music from the 30s, 40s, 50s, because my father played the standards, the classics. So composers like Sami Khan, Gershwin, all those. As I grew up in the 70s as a teenager, I knew more of those than some of the contemporary music. So I was very, very uncool amongst my contemporaries. People like James Taylor, Carly Simon, Tapestry, for example. I loved all that. But again, it was all to do with the words, the craft of the songs, the emotional impact of them, and some Welsh language music as well. So impacted with those. I suppose those are the major sorts of influences on me. I think there is a bit of a hangover from going to chapel as a child. There was a strong chapel tradition in Wales, which no longer is a strong chapel tradition anymore. But the sort of hymns I would sing, or hear congregational singing, that was there as well. And that impacted the style of writing, because those hymns have a different structure
Right.
to contemporary songs. I think my style of writing has moved away from that, but for many years I would have too many verses, strong chorus, but too many verses and songs being too long. I think one of the things which has impacted me really through the courses is to cut back, to weed, to be quite ruthless on how many verses there are. Don't be precious about what you might think you want to put in. You like that line, you've worked on it. Somebody says, no, I don't like it. And be open to criticism, cutting things out. So definitely that's something which has improved with me anyway, I think, through the years, is just honing the skill of doing it.
Both the artists and then also such things as hymnody and church music and how that can have that different impact and what you listen to around the
Yeah.
house. I definitely was influenced by, especially being the baby of the family, hearing a lot of music long before my peers were hearing it and growing up listening to music that predated me, but has persisted with me and
Yeah.
been an undercurrent in the music that I write and sing.
Yeah. Folk music as well. There's the traditional Welsh folk music. But I think youngsters are more eclectic these days. They're open-minded to all sort of genres of music, whereas I think my peers growing up as a teenager would have laughed. The sort of songs I was interested in and the craft of them. I like the songs that Fred Astaire was singing, and Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. And so now some of those are quite cool.
Yeah.
I think it's easier now. And when I play in open mics, youngsters come up to me and say, oh, I like that song. And it might be in the style of Noel Coward to an extent. There's one song I do, but it goes down pretty well. If the song's good, it doesn't matter whether it sounds like a 100-year-old song or in the style of 100 years ago. So many of our adverts on TV or on the internet are using music from a long time ago. Some of the classics crop up over and over again, I think.
Yeah, and it was so common, especially when I was growing up, that music was so genre segregated.
Yeah,
You listen to a particular format on the radio, and there was never going to be anything crossing those boundaries. In the early 2000s, I was working at a radio station where our entire format was 70s through current music. And
right.
my nephew, who was a boy at the time, would come home and say, hey, I just heard this new song. And it was not a new song, but it was such a great change. And as much as I have this huge affinity for the songs of the 80s, because that's when I was growing up, it is so dictated by those genres. There's something incredible about being able to have all these things mixed together in a playlist and to expose people to a much wider variety of music than they ever would have heard in the past.
Mm.
I still do have that affection for the radio station that I grew up listening to, but I also love that everything is so accessible and well appreciated in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly genres which I don't get. I do like comedy. I try and write some comedy style music as well. I've just written one about a psychopath, which has got that, trying to put that sort of element on it as well.
I remember as a kid listening to some various comedy writers, and that always stuck with you because the imagery was always so good. A lot of times it also is a statement on something, unless it's Weird Al, and then it's just wonderful, and we all just love that.
Yeah. There are some comedy songwriters who are well appreciated here. Jake Thackeray is one who was a folk musician, and his name often comes up. Well crafted songs, but one in particular, which I suggest you look up, is somebody called Victoria Wood. She's a heroine to so many, particular women, I would say, because there were songs that only a woman could write. Look her up, Victoria Wood.
So, what would you recommend as advice to somebody who's thinking about taking their hobby, their passion, their dream, and actually making it reality?
Being realistic, I think, is one thing. I don't know if you, like me, are on any of the Facebook songwriter sites, and so many people are so unrealistic.
Yeah.
You see them writing, they've written a sort of poem and then put it on the net. So, what do you think of my song? Nobody's listening to it, and so on. There seem to be a lot of people who are unrealistic about it. And it is a craft. What I wrote as a youngster, or when I didn't have that much time to be careful about what I was writing, much of it was rubbish. I think accepting criticism is really important part of it as well for anybody who's going to be a songwriter. To be a musician, to go out and play open mics or concerts or gigs, I think it is important to be very proactive and accept rejections, because that's part of it. To make a successful career out of it, if that's what people want, is a very difficult thing. I think if you're going to make any sort of business out of it, you have to be multifaceted, develop a range of skills. I'm not that experienced on that side of it. Perhaps you probably are much more experienced on that side of it, where doing one thing is not, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. If you're a good singer and you're hoping that's going to be your career, we've seen enough programs on TV, The Voice and Simon Cowell's programs, X Factor, and the sort of comments they make about them. You're world class. I think you're going to be amazing. And so you hear these comments. There are so many people in this small patch that I live in who have amazing talents well beyond mine as regards performance. Yet it'll only be a small band of people who will ever hear them. So luck, I think, is being realistic that luck is an important part of it. And that thing, I don't know if you heard the quote about inspiration is 1%, perspiration is 99% of success.
Right.
I think that's true. I've mentioned about the admin for me. I enjoy the creative parts of it, but all the hard graft, you've got to be prepared for that, and being prepared for poverty and rejection. I sound like I'm saying don't, but if that is your passion and that's who you are, whether it's on a professional level or on an amateur level, you have to make the decision as an individual about it. You are an adult, so you have to decide.
And it's absolutely a bare minimum that you be skilled, because that's what everyone is expecting. But at the same time, that person with pretty decent skills who actually works hard and networks and takes care of all of the details and tries to reach out and build community will go farther than the person with extraordinary talent who just sits back and waits to be discovered, because that's not the music industry anymore.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, that was a thing, but it's really not. And so for anybody who really does want to follow their dream, yeah, you can go for it, but you do have to realize it is going to be work, but it's hopefully not going to feel like work because you're doing what you love. Know that you're skills are solid because that's what people will expect. And then that will get you more and more open doors.
Yeah. I think the danger is wanting fame, because that is a false goal. If you want to make a living out of it, I think that's probably much more realistic. The music is about creativity. It's about yourself and what you stand for when you do that. And you might have to do a whole lot of things. You might have to be an individual artist, or you might have to be a studio musician as well. You might have to produce. You might have to pick up these range of skills. But I think being realistic, being ambitious, some people obviously will be very, very successful, but you're more likely going to win the lottery.
I think that's a great distinction between fame and making a living. And it's important because wouldn't you rather be able to walk down the street in anonymity and
Definitely.
live comfortably than be
Yeah.
famous and all the trappings that come with it? It's not an easy life. We look at
Yeah.
those who are famous and think, "Oh, wow, isn't that amazing?" But there's a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. So it's not an easy life.
Massive trade-off, I think my ideal life would have been, and I've had a really nice life thus far, plenty to go, hopefully, but being a songwriter, a successful songwriter, rather than a mega successful performer. Just imagine going for a walk
Yeah.
anywhere. Just doing the everyday things would be such a chore. You couldn't go to your local supermarket or anywhere. You couldn't go for a walk in the countryside. You'd meet up with people who want selfies all the time. Yeah. Initially, maybe, oh, that sounds nice. But in the end, it'd be such a chore. So, yeah, agree with you.
That's for sure. Well, at the risk of potentially making you famous, where can people learn about your music and connect with you online?
If you type in on Google or whatever, Phil Lovell, and then Baglanbren, there we are, Baglanbren. I've got some songs at the moment. Hopefully, there'll be more in the future on Spotify and all the different things. There'll be stuff on TikTok and Instagram, without doubt, in the future, because I'm going to spend a lot of time making those. Having fun making those. But there are some songs of mine. Phil Lovell, Baglanbren. Type those in, you'll find me.
So later in the show, I will share one of your songs, and I'm just going to have you say it right now because I won't be able to pronounce it.
So it's Dwi'n canu fy nghân. Dwi'n canu fy nghân. I'm singing my song. And there's what's called a nasal mutation in there. So the Welsh language has something called mutations in it, which is fairly peculiar to our language, where the first letter in words sometimes changes. So people who learn the language, they have trouble with this. So the word for song is calm. But when you have the word my in front of it, the word becomes nghân, fy nghân. So there we are.
That is fascinating.
Dwi'n canu fy nghân.
And I'm going to guarantee
I'm
that,
singing my song.
much of the audience may not have heard anything in Welsh. So this will be a really wonderful opportunity when we close out the show that way.
There's an English version of the song as well. If I do open mics or any performances anywhere, quite often I do a mixture. I'll sing half the song in Welsh and half the song in English.
That's
But
great.
this one's in Welsh.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. This has been really fun. And I'm so glad that you've been here on the show.
Well, diolch, which means thank you. Diolch. Hwyl fawr is, well, goodbye, but basically you're saying have great fun. So our way of saying goodbye to somebody is saying have great fun. Hwyl fawr.
Oh, that's the best.
And you're not saying it back to me, but never mind.
I would destroy it.
Well, with your Welsh heritage, I'm disappointed in you.
Well, I didn't get a chance to hear it growing up, but it's just so fun to get to hear it and to be able to share it with the audience. I don't think many of them would have heard Welsh and heard it sung. So I'm excited to be able to share that with everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, have a good afternoon, and it's bedtime for me. So no star. Good night. That's an easy one. No star, no stars means good night.
No star.
No star.
Love that.
Bye.
hope you enjoyed this thoughtful and enlightening conversation with Phil Lovell. From childhood piano memories to daily songwriting walks, Phil reminds us that creativity is not bound by age. It only deepens with time and intention. One of my favorite takeaways was the huge impact our music or art can and should have on a society. While we might think that our role is purely for entertainment, both ours and our audience's entertainment, we actually can have a much more profound role, and that's why it's all the more important that we create and release music into the world. Another important part of the conversation is Phil's reminder to set both achievable goals and ambitious ones. That's such a powerful combination, especially for those of us in our second act. Whether you're building skills in music production, finding your songwriting voice, or just exploring your creative side, it's not too late to begin or begin again. If you've been holding back because you think your message isn't enough, or your audience is too small, or because self-promotion feels awkward, let Phil be your nudge forward. Get your work out there. Keep showing up. If you're ready to clarify your own message and elevate your online presence, visit me at attitudecreativity.com. And if you're enjoying this podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review it. It really helps most listeners discover these stories. Stick around to hear Phil's song, Dwi'n canu nghân, an energetic and fun track that might have you singing along even in Welsh. Until next time, keep chasing your second verse. And hwyl fawr.
Dwi'n canu fy nghân, mae'r tywydd yn braf. Mae'n haf o hyd, awyr las bob dydd, mae mawyd i'n dda. Ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi yn yr haf. Pryfed ma'n blodau gwyllt, llais y lliwgar llon. Dyddiau da yw'r dyddiau hen, wy'n byw ar frig y don. Wy'n byw ar frig y don. Dwi'n canu fy nghân, mae'r tywydd yn braf. Mae'n haf o hyd, awyr las bob dydd, mae mawyd i'n dda. Ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi yn yr haf. Mae pawb yn gwenu, sneb yn drist, ti a fi ynghyd. Mae'r lle yn llawn rhaid i nawr, we're dawnsio yn y stryd. Dyn ni'n dawnsio yn y stryd. Dwi'n canu fy nghân, mae'r tywydd yn braf. Mae'n haf o hyd, awyr las bob dydd, mae mawyd i'n dda. Ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi yn yr haf. Du-du-du, 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 du-du-du. Dwi'n canu fy nghân, mae'r tywydd yn braf. Mae'n haf o hyd, awyr las bob dydd, mae mawyd i'n dda. Ti gyda fi, dwi'n canu fy nghân, mae'r tywydd yn braf. Mae'n haf o hyd, awyr las bob dydd, mae mawyd i'n dda. Ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi, ti gyda fi.